Hi, my name is Amy Bracewell, and it is my privilege to serve as the superintendent of the Vanderbilt and Roosevelt National Historic Sites in Hyde Park, New York. Happy 139th birthday to President Franklin Delano Roosevelt. Here, he grew up at Springwood and in Hyde Park, New York, and launched his political career from this area. During this year of inauguration and transition of our government, I think back about FDR's first inauguration. During a time in the country where we were facing the Great Depression, unemployment, drought in the Midwest, and the Dust Bowl. And during his first inaugural address, he noted that we must face these arduous days before us with the warm courage of the national unity. For his birthday, I encourage you to learn more about President Roosevelt's leadership during these critical times in our country and how we were able to come out of it together stronger as a nation. Thank you.
Dance so others might walk. That was the theme of President Franklin Delano Roosevelt's birthday balls that were held throughout the nation every January 30th from 1934 to 1945. Some of the larger parties in Washington or New York had celebrity entertainers who would draw large crowds. The goal of the birthday celebrations was to raise money to combat a disease called infantile paralysis or polio. It was caused by a virus that paralyzed or crippled its victims, mostly children and young adults. Also a victim of this horrible virus that left his legs paralyzed, FDR was determined to find a cure and also provide means for rehabilitation for those who became disabled as a result of polio. He purchased a place in Warm Springs, Georgia, and set up a rehabilitation facility there. He created the Warm Springs Foundation to help fund rehabilitation projects. As president, he helped create the National Foundation for Infantile Paralysis that would help fund research for a cure. On his birthday, FDR gave a brief radio address to the nation about the birthday ball. To commemorate his 139th birthday, we would like to share a few of his remarks from these radio addresses over the years. It is a glorious thing to have one's birthday associated with work like this. The generous participation in this fight is a sign of democracy in action. The unity of our people in helping those who are disabled and protecting the welfare of our young and preserving the eternal principle of kindliness, all of this is evidence of our fundamental strength. You are participating in the finest birthday present you could possibly give me. At the same time, you are participating in birthday presents for thousands of children in every part of the country. My heart goes out in gratitude to the whole American people tonight, for we have found a common cause in presenting a solid front against an insidious and deadly enemy, the scourge of infantile paralysis. The fight is being conducted with national unity, and we believe we're growing success. And finally, I like to think the celebrations from one end of the country to the other tonight are an indication of the national determination to wage unending warfare against a national peril. As president, FDR used the celebration of his birthday for an important cause, battling a national health crisis. Though it would not happen during his lifetime, the monies the birthday balls generated helped create the financial foundation for the research that eventually resulted in the cure that FDR hoped to achieve, the Salk vaccine that ended the scourge of polio.
Ladies and gentlemen, family and friends, welcome and greetings from the United States Military Academy. I'm so honored to be here today on behalf of the President of the United States for the 139th celebration of the birthday of our 32nd President, President Franklin Delano Roosevelt. I would like to thank the National Park Service for this opportunity to speak on this occasion on the heels of one of the most tumultuous years of our country's history. I'm both humbled by this opportunity and inspired by the dedication of President Roosevelt, as you know, led our country during particularly tumultuous times through both the Great Depression and World War II. And I think that today, as we celebrate his birthday with this wreath laying, it is important to reflect on his leadership during times of crisis. I am flanked by the statue of General Dwight D. Eisenhower, who assisted President Roosevelt in one of the most important undertakings of the modern age, the Allied invasion of Europe. I thought it an appropriate setting in which to speak of FDR's legacy of inspired leadership during crises. While the subject of leadership during challenging times has, of course, many components, I think we can find one particular element of President Roosevelt's leadership during crises instructive, even in these times dealing with a pandemic, racial turbulence, and a divisive election: the ability to cultivate community. President Roosevelt found creating community fundamental to surviving any crisis, even stating, "If civilization is to survive, we must cultivate the science of human relationships, the ability of all peoples, of all kinds, to live together in the same world at peace." Throughout his presidency and his life, the theme of community permeated everything that President Roosevelt did. Community is evident in his early life, his career, his speeches, and his famous fireside chats that brought people from across the nation together. During both the Depression and World War II, President Roosevelt found it important to take time to ensure that his message and delivery served to unify, especially when the messages were difficult. He prioritized an intimate connection to the American people. During both the Depression and the war, this connection often took the form of building community over the radio via fireside chats. In these chats, he was able to communicate clearly, dispel myths, and build trust, all fundamental goals to working through a crisis. Both President Roosevelt and his audiences were able to picture an intimate conversation in which a reciprocal connectedness and a shared understanding could be reached. During the Depression and the implementation of the New Deal, he used chats to assure the nation of progress and spoke firsthand about the effects of his policies. Millions would tune in from their homes for these radio addresses, giving them an opportunity to see inside the White House. Radio historian John Dunning noted that it was the first time in history that a large segment of the population could listen directly to a chief executive. He was a president for the people, and Americans felt more confident when he was on air. He welcomed listeners with the calming, "my friends," or "my fellow Americans," putting them at ease and bringing them into difficult conversations. The nation became united with him as their leader, and communities worked together to tackle tough problems. During an era when dialogue can seem to lead to more division, it is refreshing to look back and see that during the Depression, there were clear links between his talks and Americans taking communal action. During the Depression, that connection meant people returned money to cash-strapped banks and a communal understanding and buy-in of some of the more complex policies of the New Deal. Throughout the crisis of World War, his efforts to build community continued unabated. Community was critical once more. Roosevelt built community overseas to include a warm and necessary relationship with Winston Churchill. And he cultivated relationships with military leaders, such as his Chief of Staff, George C. Marshall, and the man behind me, Dwight D. Eisenhower. He also continued building community via his chats. His fireside chat after Pearl Harbor achieved a record-high audience for a presidential address at the time. He asked his listeners to hover over a world map with him, while he explained the progress of the war in 1942 and 1943. It was over the radio that he explained the details of the D-Day invasion under General Eisenhower, calling it the hammer blow that struck the coast of France. There is no doubt that had he survived until the war's end, he would have taken great pleasure in celebrating its conclusion in community with the American people. In closing, it is also worth noting that during the war, he also envisioned a larger global community as he realized the connectedness of the American people with those facing tyranny across the globe. He captured this communal vision in his 4 freedoms: freedom of speech and expression everywhere in the world, freedom of every person to worship God everywhere in the world, freedom from want everywhere in the world, and freedom from fear anywhere in the world. In hindsight, it is perhaps easy to take his ability to build community for granted. Yet also in hindsight, we can see that ability as instrumental to his accomplishments. His efforts to build community mattered. Addressing the crisis of the Great Depression head-on after being inaugurated in 1933, he had one of the most productive first 100 days in our nation's history, one that many historians would argue has become the benchmark for later presidents. In his first 6 months, President Roosevelt created long-lasting programs and enterprises, many of which are still in effect today: the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation, the Federal Communications Commission, the Securities and Exchange Commission, the Tennessee Valley Authority, and arguably the most important, Social Security. These programs were designed to ease the burden of the Great Depression, to provide relief for banks, creditors, farmers, young laborers, and to improve the living conditions for those less fortunate. They, in essence, strengthen America's sense of community by giving everyone a fair shake. Moreover, during World War II, he built communities across countries, across militaries, and across peoples to defeat what was perhaps the largest and most formidable war machine in history. President Roosevelt was an inspiring leader. He connected with people and unified them during 2 decades of unprecedented uncertainty and challenge. He united the community under a common purpose to ensure that everyone had an equal opportunity to chase the American dream, and that the Allied powers triumph over fascism. His biographer, Jean Edward Smith, stated, "He lifted himself from a wheelchair to lift the nation," I would add the world, "from its knees." Today, as our world seems increasingly uncertain and complex, we are reminded of the hope and strength of community, especially during uncertain times. As President Roosevelt stated, "We have always held to the hope, the belief, the conviction that there is a better life, a better world beyond the horizon." In January of 2021, we can appreciate holding on to such a hope. Thank you.
No man has ever had a finer birthday remembrance from his friends and fellows than you have given me tonight. It is with an humble and a thankful heart that I accept this tribute through me to the stricken ones of our great national family. I thank you, but I lack the words to tell you how deeply I appreciate what you have done. And I bid you good night on what is to me the happiest birthday that I have ever known.